Hey everyone, so if you have been following my channel, you probably already know I've been having this CYC X1 Pro motor for quite a while now. It took me a lot of time working on my bike, getting everything to work just right. I started with just the motor and no controller, had to use my own controller, and now I got the final controller, and on and on and on. Had issues with um, the BB spindle going bad. I had issues with my drivetrain slipping. Just a lot of random things on my bike that needed a lot of work. So this video is going to be more of a setup tip, or kind of like a quick um, review slash setup tip. So for those who haven't gotten the CYC X1 Pro yet, or is waiting to get theirs, or thinking about getting it, hopefully you guys will find this video useful. So the bike I have is a 2012 Giant. It's a 2012 Giant Glory. It's a downhill frame. It has a threaded 83mm bottom bracket, so everything bolts right on in. No adapters needed. So one of the issues I had with the stock 83mm spindle was the left crank. So the right crank has plenty of experience, but the left um, distance, I'm sorry, and then the left crank came really close to the rear chainstay back here, or the chain swing arm. So what I did was, since I bought the optional 100mm BB spindle, I was able to space it out and just use spacers to align my crank, so that way now I have plenty of clearance. And I'm not sure if you guys can see in the video, but on the back of this crank set, or this crank arm, I actually tried to sand it down and grind it down, but it still left me with like 2mm of clearance between the crank arm and this piece right here. So for me, I would say if you guys are riding on the road, you have a hardtail, it wouldn't be an issue. But for a full suspension, this rear is going to flex depending on how hard you ride, and this crank arm may move a little bit. And with 2mm of clearance, a little rock gets in there, it's just going to, damage your bike. So I thought about it long and hard, and I ended up using the 100mm BB spindle, and it works pretty darn good. And my chain alignment, it's pretty much dead on. So yeah, and the chain ring that I'm using, it's gonna be a 36 tooth narrow wide chain ring. I have a full-size mountain bike. I have a wide ratio cassette back there, so I was debating if I should use like a 32 tooth front chain ring or a 36. And I figured, since downhill bikes, they configured with like a 34 36 tooth front chain ring, and like a downhill cassette in the back. Since I have this as the motor, I wouldn't really need a small chain ring to climb up hills. And by having a 48 tooth large cog back here, I can probably get away with a 36 tooth front chain ring. This is all original stuff. This is the 72 tooth main drive gear. CYC does offer two other optional ones, which is smaller if you guys want to get those. I believe the next smaller one's going to be like the size of like a 38 tooth or a 36 tooth chainring back here, and there's even one even smaller, but I didn't get that because I got mines before everyone else, and yeah, I don't have the beauty of having all those parts. It bolts right on in. It's very simple. So depending on your bike, if you have a bottom bracket that is smaller than an 83mm, you will need to use spacers. And you can see, probably not a good example, but CYC does include red spacers, and you just got to use the appropriate spacers depending on your bike frame. And then on this side, I had to use an additional spacer. This is the two smaller spacers, and also to use another additional spacer that I had laying around to get the spacing just right, because if I don't use my own spacer, then there's like a small little like 2mm gap. A few things I've had with mine is the left crank arm. I guess it was machine wrong or molded wrong. I'm not even sure, but it fits pretty loose on here, and when I tighten it down, it pushes his arm too much against the spacer here, and everything binds up. And that was how I damaged my first BB spindle. So I have two 83mm, the first one and the second one, and actually both went bad. So let me show you guys what I'm talking about here. So this one I actually tried to take apart, but it's really hard. But pretty much I cannot turn it by hand. After like a couple rides, it just got really bad, really rough. And then on this one, same thing. You can see I cannot turn it by hand easy like it was new. So one thing you want to keep in mind is when you're building this, take your time. When you're tightening down the crank bolts, especially on the left side, tighten it down and just make sure that you can turn this free. Take off the chain, take off all that, and just make sure you can you know, spin your crank freely. Because if there's a little bit of resistance, that usually, or that will tell you that something is going on and you don't want the system to bind up. Because of this, not system, the drivetrain. If this spindle bearing binds up, you're going to get really bad rough bearings, cause inefficiency, and maybe even overload the motor controller and even make it harder to pedal. That was why both of my 83mm BB went bad, and I just got fed up with it. And I actually figured out it's because of the left crank arm. Mine was machined wrong, and I haven't got a replacement yet. I'm hoping I will. But currently, I do want to switch back to a 83mm spindle, so that way I can put everything closer to the frame, use offset crank arms to make all this, you know, narrow. Because when you're riding a mountain bike, you know, especially on single tracks, you want to keep your bike as slim and narrow as possible. You don't want a lot of stuff sticking out to catch on and stuff, but it is what it is. So moving on to the drivetrain. It's very important that you have a good drivetrain. Initially, before I installed the SRAM EX1 cassette, derailleur, and shifter, I was using my Shimano. I had a Shimano Saint. I even bought another long cage derailleur. So most importantly, you want to make sure you have a good derailleur. Your derailleur needs to have a very strong clutch. The reason why is because if your clutch is weak, under the load of the motor, it's not going to provide enough tension or slack, and your chain's going to slip and potentially jump. Also, you want to make sure that you size your chain correctly to your bike. If you have a full suspension bike, you want to make sure you compress the suspension as much as it would go, and then size it from there. Do a search, look up Worldwide Cycler's video on how to size a chain. It's super simple according to the instructions, and I went that route. Initially, I was looking at the Park Tool video and reading their how-to sizing video. Very confusing. They said take off the chain, yada yada yada. I watched Worldwide Cycler's on their website. I didn't even watch the video, I just read how to do it. And pretty much it said put everything in, put into the small cog, and then make sure you have a little bit of tension on here, and that is the size. I took it all apart, I played around and spent an hour just doing comparison between Worldwide Cycler's video and also Park Tools video, and it's just so much easier doing it with everything in the system, so that way you can check your whole drivetrain. So yeah. Cassette, you want to make sure you use a good strong cassette, especially if you're running like 14S or more. Higher power setups will need a stronger cassette. If you're using like an aluminum cassette, it's gonna most likely bend the teeth. The SRAM EX1, I believe all of these are steel except for the large 48 tube, which is aluminum. But the first 1, 2, 3, and 4, these 4 pieces is a solid block of steel, and these are individual. And according to my chain alignment, not sure if you guys can see it, it's very hard to tell in the video, but it's pretty much dead on. I have an 8-speed, so it's, you know, it's on the 4th one. So chain alignment is between these two right here, which is perfect. So I can, you know, I can run the wide range without having any issues. And I believe before, if you guys watch my videos on the same bike before I repainted, it was initially white and blue, but I was having issues on the first 3, or I would say maybe the first 1 through 4 on the smaller cogs. I was having issues with the chain jumping off, and it was just slipping, and I couldn't figure out why. It was a number of things. Chain length was not sized correctly. I actually did the wrong, I compressed it way too much. I took off the shock and I bent it. That was not the right way. I had the derailleur was too soft, and a big mess. But turns out after I switched everything, I spent some time doing everything correctly, and I realized that having a good strong derailleur will make a difference. And also you want to use a good strong hub. If you're running a cassette that has like individual teeth, be prepared to have that eat into the free body. That's gonna dig into there, and it's gonna damage the free body. So you want to use either a steel free body, or you want to use something that has like a big cluster that's connected together, because under load it's going to damage the free body. On this one is steel. You can see I ran it, but you can still see under the power it starts digging in there. Even with steel, it digs in. It still digs into the system. You want to run a good quality chain. Chain is probably not that important if your chain alignment is good. If your chain alignment is bad, then it's gonna give you issues. So wiring, you guys can figure it out. Every bike is different, so depending on how you have your bike, everybody will do their wiring differently. I'm still cleaning it up, but I just reinstalled it with a different bracket, and so far everything is working perfect. No issues, no slipping. Feels really good. I am glad that I didn't go with a much smaller chainring, because the 36 tooth is just perfect. Gives me a good balance between torque and speed. So when I ride on the road, if I decide to go to work, whatever, I have a good balance between speed. And by using that, it allows me to stay out of the smaller gears if I don't have to use it. So it's good for road commute. I can still use like maybe the fourth smallest one, which is still part of the solid block of steel. So yeah, let me see what else. Make sure you double check everything. People have been reporting that this ring right here that holds the bearing or whatever clutch bearing, it gets loose. Mine's haven't had any issues. Make sure you use the correct size tool. Some really strong ones. I've used some Harbor Freight little Allen handles right over here. You can see those. Those ended up stripping out the hole. So you want to use quality tool that fits these just perfect, or else you're gonna strip those. I purchased aftermarket bolts that holds a chainring because I want something longer. The ones that comes with the kit, I don't know, they were just huge and ridiculously not the best quality. CYC told me to crank down these crank bolts really tight. I would just say, just hand tight, and then just do like another quarter twist would probably be all you need. I use grease on everything, so everything, it's nice and lubricated, doesn't bind up or anything like that. I actually cleaned the chain. The chain came with a lot of thick grease on there. I actually just degreased it, and I used some dry lube on here. And the reason why I use dry lube, I would just redo it like every couple rides, because out here in California it's really dusty, and if you use wet lube or grease or thick lube, it's going to attract dust, and it's going to make a very nasty drivetrain setup. Let me see what else that I need to do. And your battery, whatever battery you use, I'm still working on my particular setup. But on this bike, it was originally a downhill bike with big 200 or long travel 200 millimeter front dual crown forks. But I switched to the RockShox Totem. It's a 40 millimeter stanchion, 20 millimeter through axle. The rear is a 12 by 150 millimeter through axle, so everything is solid. I don't have skinny quick release, clamps on there holding the wheels, because when you have a very powerful setup and you're planning to go fast, you plan to go down a mountain, you have extra weight, you just got to be careful and make sure your bike is properly set up to handle that extra abuse. Wiring wise, speed sensor, the CYC speed sensor that comes with it and stuff like that, I would say it's cool, but the way that CYC gives it to you, this is my bracket from my old bike, but when you put the speed sensor, you're supposed to put it here onto the frame. Well, the problem is the magnet goes into the spoke, and you can see it's just too far away, so I had to use a space here that goes like this, or whatever my bob, I forgot how I did it. I think it was like this or something. Oh, it was like this. Well, on my old bike, it actually fit something like this, and it allowed that to be closer, and that's why I made this out of Instamode. It has some little plastic beads that you can mold up into a shape, and that's what I did to get that sensor close to the spoke and the magnet as close as possible. This is what they give you. It just fits between the cable for the speed sensor is not that long, so this sensor needs to go back here. Pedal assist sensor, you can see here's mine. Yeah, it stopped working, so I can't use it right now. Sucks because I do like pedal assist, but yeah, it doesn't work. And then currently, yeah, all that's there. Yeah, besides that, I mean, I don't have anything else to say, talk about much. You guys saw a lot of videos, and most important thing is everybody wants to see the ride video. So I just got this bike put together. I just upgraded this whole rear section. I just got the whole new paint job, and this whole rear is new chainring, new rim, new hub. I got the DT Swiss 240S, new tire, new cassettes. So this overall whole rear was pretty expensive, but I wanted a setup that's gonna last and not give me any issues. So the whole rear and all this stuff cost more than what I got the bike for, sadly, but that's the truth. um, so yeah, yep, stay tuned. Hope you guys found that video useful. Oh, did I mention, if you guys are using smaller with bottom brackets, you will have to use spacers. So if you have like a 68mm bottom bracket or even a 73, if you don't put any spacers on the drive side and you put spacers on this side, there's a chance that your cup will not be long enough to bolt down and properly thread into the bottom bracket. It's gotta be very careful. Make sure you have a good amount of thread, at least half of the cup. If you have just like 1 or 2 threads biting on, it's not gonna work, and that's not the correct way to do it. If you have a bike that has, for example, video is getting too long, but I'm trying to cram as much stuff into here as possible. If you have a bike that has a press fit bottom bracket, for example, if you guys saw my old video, I had a yellow bike, the Common Style Meta 4.2. That one had a BB 92mm bottom bracket, so I had to purchase these adapters. These are actually very cheap. It's just an adapter that converts the press fit into a threaded BSA bottom bracket. And I got these on eBay for like 11-12 bucks, shipped from China. I believe they're like a couple bucks more now, but at the time I got it, it was pretty cheap. Use some thread locker, install it in, and yeah. Oh, when you're using these adapters, and that's assuming I'm already, you know, most modern bikes with the BB92s are running boost spacing. So if you have boost spacing, there is a big chance that your chain alignment is not going to be dead on. It's going to be off. I am pretty sure, because on my Meta I was not able to use the 2 largest gear because the chain alignment was like on the 3rd smallest gear. So I had 11 speed and I was only to use like, you know, 9 speed instead of the full 11 speed. I would say under load you may without motor load and just regular pedal you can probably do it, but if your chain alignment is really bad, I would be very careful and not use the full gears on your cassette, because if it's off, you can bend it, you can snap a chain, you can do a lot of damage under high power, so be very careful. It's confusing, but visit the CYC Facebook group. There's a lot of good, useful stuff on there. There's a lot of guys, well, a few guys posting stuff every single day of what they do, tips, issues, modifications, and improvements, and so on. I haven't really done much with the whole motor, just my drivetrain setup and getting everything to work. Here's my battery. This is a 12S LiPo battery. Just 3 4-cell batteries running in series. These are a 4S 9,000 amp hour battery. So you can see it just fits right on here inside this triangle. What I am planning to do is make a bracket and putting the batteries like this onto the down tube. So you can see by doing that, it's just going to make everything more streamlined and blend in. Because when I have the battery here, it just sticks out like a sore thumb. And by having it like this and maybe one battery up here, I can still run a 12S. And it just gives me a more sleek, you know, factory look without having a big bulky battery that sits right up here. But yeah, maybe one day I'll try 12S, or I'm sorry, I would try 16S or even 20S. But that's for the future. Right now, 12S is probably more than what I would need for the local trails and road commute. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope if you guys found this video useful, that's big plus. Hope you guys, you know, found it useful. If not, you can always leave a comment box below. If you guys have any questions, need help with anything, feel free, leave a comment, and I'll try my best to get back to you as soon as possible. See ya.